And with that, we welcome you into a full house on this Friday night, top of the hour at 10 o'clock. And this is the Gem City Sports Podcast in conjunction with the Critical Eye tonight. Another great episode in store for you. Isaac Petcash, Jonathan Williams, Paul Adamczak, and Nick Artman. The gang is all here. If you're watching us on the CW, welcome. If you're watching on simulcast on Erie News Now Facebook page, the Flagship City Facebook page, as well as Twitter, YouTube, and Twitch, welcome in. So glad you're watching. Gents, we thought week one was going to be a crazy week in high school football, and it somewhat was. This week, though, is shaping up to be even crazier. We have some games that just went final that went down to the wire and others that are one-score games right now. How do you not love this time of year?
It's great. I love it.
Well, in high school, it's like you never know what to expect, right? I mean, you go into these games, especially early on, and you're saying, okay, you know, GM is in Harbor Creek, it's going to be a tough game, and then we'll get into that. You know, McDowell is always looking good. We're going to get into that. You know, Farrell dominates everybody. We're going to get into that. You know, so it's just it's like you never know what to expect in the early part of a high school football season.
We're going to get to all these games and all the scores in just a minute or so. We do have some highlights coming in as well. A lot of conversation and reaction to the games tonight, and we hope to have a head coach calling in. We'll get to that in a second. Nick just foreshadowed it. I want to start, though, with our game of the week that we had here on Erie News Now, and that was General McLean and Harbor Creek. That game is final. Marshall McCormick squad, 47-19 winners over Harbor Creek tonight. Jonathan, we will not play your prediction. Although that's what bold predictions are for. It's okay. We make them. Sometimes we are wrong. Paul, you were at this game, though, and we hope to have highlights later in the show. We'll give them for you if we can. It was a late end. GM was close last week, went to the Whitfield Powerhouse in Newcastle. They lost 49-47. Clearly the offense was on display tonight.
2 weeks in a row, they put up 47 points. So they were on fire from the get-go. 7-7 start. They had 5 drives in the first half. All 5 ended in touchdowns. Zeitz, the quarterback, Isaac, he sat down with about 6 or 7 minutes to play in the third quarter. It was pretty much well decided by then. Mercy rule game in effect. Harbor Creek looked pretty good on that opening drive, went right down the field, 8 or 9 play drive. Tyshawn Jones looked good on that drive. I don't know if he got roughed up a little bit on that first one, but he kind of seemed to be in and out throughout the rest of the game. So Harbor Creek off their game a little bit. GM was very, very good.
Yeah, I saw they punted for the first time on drive number 8.
Yep.
And other than that, it was like you said, first 5-6 drives are a touchdown.
Yeah.
And then drive number 8's first time you punt with your backup offense.
Correct.
That's a good place to be.
Yeah.
Taking a look at some of the stats today, we'll start in the passing department, as Paul was talking about. Stats coming in courtesy of Mark Iser from General McLean. Isaac Seitz, 14 of 16, 274 yards and 2 touchdowns. He did have a pick, but the rushing attack was really the story. Nick Swenson, 5 carries for 58 yards. Cohen Beachley had a touchdown. So did T. Berger. So did Isaac Seitz. Jared Corwin and P.J. Mitchell. There were 5 different players who had rushing touchdowns for General McLean tonight. And by the way, Jacob Seitz followed up his mega performance last week with another 130-yard mediocre performance.
No big deal.
Marshall McCormick joked about
No
it
big
last
deal.
night in the General McLean win.
I'm telling you, that ZZ Top connection, it's going to catch on.
It's going to be an awesome.
It's going to catch
And
on.
all those numbers in 2.5 quarters.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
It's interesting. We talked, guys, about General McLean. We had Marshall McCormick on the podcast last night. In case you missed it, make sure to go to YouTube and check that one out. And he talked about how playing a Whitfield Powerhouse in week 1 would help this team figure out how to figure things out in the next couple of weeks of the season. And it seems like they've taken that to heart. Paul, what were some of the things that you saw that stood out to you? Of course, the offense was big, but defensively as well. We know that this GM team's front 4 is pretty good. What defensively did they do to stop Harbor Creek's offense tonight?
They were coming downhill. The first drive, I think they kind of played like that week 1 defense where they allowed 49 points. Coach Wayne Bradford, the defensive coordinator for them, really tightened things down. The safeties, a little bit undersized, but those guys were flying around. And you love to see that when you guys got lining up 10 yards off the line of scrimmage and coming downhill and getting tackles in the backfield.
Yeah.
John, your safety. That's a beautiful thing. You love to see
He knows a little
happens.
bit about that.
I think they played a lot better gap control, especially as the game went on. Harbor Creek got worn down a little bit, but really offensively, that was the story. And you mentioned the number of running backs that got carries in this game and how he uses them positionally. You got a guy who will line up in the backfield in the pistol set one play, get the rock, he's out to the slot the next play on the left side. The next play, he's split wide to the right, and he comes across in jet motion and gets the ball again. He gets the ball to so many different guys in so many different ways.
Yeah.
That's what stood out to me.
Just move them around.
And again, 47-19 winners over Harbor Creek in what was one of the more one-sided games tonight. Just going down the list of some one-score games, we have a bunch of them. We're going to get to all of them in just a moment. But let's get to some highlights, Judge, shall we? And for that, we go about 10 miles to the west of us. We're at McDowell. Aaron Slocum with his home opener against a tough test from Ohio, and that would be the Walsh Jesuit Warriors. There's Slocum. McDowell looking to go 2-0 to start the year. They're down 14-7 in the second quarter until Keller Moton finds Lucas Weaver all alone. That made it 21-7 late in the first half. But then Walsh Jesuit gets the ball back with under a minute to go. Deep in their own territory, but Keller doesn't care. He is able to take off, get inside the red zone, and all of a sudden, the Warriors knocking on the door of another touchdown, and it sets up this. It's Keller Moton to the D1 recruit, Milan Paris, his second TD of the first half, 27-7 at the break. McDowell in trouble, but they get some life in the third quarter off a Stephon Porter run. Take a look at this video game move. Gets by one, shakes off a second, says, get off me on a third, sidesteps a fourth, and then is off to the races. Nearly scores, but loses his balance at the 2-yard line, and that sets up this. Brody Bonsell in from a pair of yards. That made it a 2-score game at that point, but the Trojans fall 47-21 in Aaron Slocum's first game at home as head coach. Jonathan, you and I were at this game. We just got back a little bit ago. Offenses, when it was working, had some glimpses, but the defense for McDowell struggling today. Really, Walsh Jesuit did a great job of spreading the ball around the field.
Yeah, spreading the ball around the field, but also they ran the ball really well, and they ran the ball between the tackles really well. It was one of those things where they were doing whatever they wanted, it seemed like at times, and they could kind of get to whatever they wanted to get to. Their quarterback was spreading the ball around the field really well. They were mixing in a lot of different passing styles. They were throwing screens. They were throwing bubbles. They were throwing slants. They were going across the middle of the field. It was just kind of everything was clicking for them tonight, and it showed in the final score.
And again, this is an offense that runs through Stephon Porter. It runs through quarterback Blaze Myers, but there are other options too for McDowell. They sit 1-1 of the season now. We know the recipe for them to be able to win games, Jonathan. What do you think will need to change going into week 3, if anything?
Well, everything that I've heard about Blaze at quarterback, he's a really good quarterback. And everything that I've heard from people around McDowell tonight is he just didn't look like himself tonight. So him getting back to playing his game, him getting back to playing his brand of football, fitting passes in windows, firing passes in windows. He lofted a couple tonight. One of them wound up being intercepted. If he can get back to playing his style of football and his brand of football and playing quarterback the way that everyone around here knows he can play quarterback, they will be fine.
All right, we got to take a break, but so much more to get to. More highlights coming up, some games just going final. We're going to discuss what might have been the biggest home win of the night for a team just a few miles down the road. That's coming up next as we roll along on the Critical Eye and the Gem City Sports Podcast. All right, back on the Gem City Sports Podcast Network here on the Critical Eye. Again, simulcasting on YouTube, on Twitch, on Facebook, And a new thing for us, again, we're in week 2 of this, so make sure to give us a follow. Let us know how we're doing here in week 2. Isaac Petcash, Jonathan Williams, Paul Adamczak, Nick Artman. It's been a crazy busy show to start with. We showed you the McDowell highlights. We talked about game of the week between General McLean and Harbor Creek. I want to get to a couple of big scores here that we are just coming in final, specifically in Region 5 and other areas of the Erie County area. Final in Grove City, close game, 13-6. The Eagles knocking off Fairview tonight. But what a defensive performance from the Tigers. And if this doesn't cement the fact that they're a legit team, I don't know what does. Grove City, again, the perennial powerhouse in 3A in that Mercer County circuit. So as we move forward, Fairview going to be a team to look out for. But the game that stood out in the closest game, you could argue, of the entire night tonight, how about Fort LaBeouf? Trailing 2 scores in the second half, they come back and they beat Farrell, the 2A powerhouse, who now drops to 0-2, 29-28. Just your reaction, guys, from the final score coming in. I for one, this might be Justin Blows' biggest win as LaBeouf head coach.
Early game of the year candidate. I know, week 2, calm down. But really, how many games do you get like this in a year? A 2-point conversion to go up at home? Let's go for it, man. Come on.
With 2:30 left.
With 2:30 left, and it wasn't a cupcake opponent. We're talking about Farrell. You said a perennial playoff dog.
Yeah.
I mean, this is not a weak team. First time Fort LaBeouf gets one on Farrell in school, like program history. So that's a big win in and of itself. But in that fashion, in that stadium, against that team, boy, what a big night.
that had to be a crazy environment to be a part of, especially if you're a player for Fort LaBeouf. I know they are partying out in Water.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And rightfully so.
Bonitoville is rocking.
Man.
Now, I said this to Isaac earlier. So you, Paul and Isaac, you guys are the ones that, you grew up around here. You're locals through and through. How have you ever seen Farrell like this? 0-2, they're playing tight games, but they're usually the powerhouse. Is this?
Yeah, I mean, again, admittedly for me, I did not get a chance to go out to Farrell football camp. We unfortunately don't get to see a lot of the Mercer County team earlier in the year, but it's just an expectation every single year that the Farrell Steelers are one of, if not the best team to come out of District 10 every year. I think week 1 was a bit of a tough game for them in the fact that they faced a loaded Hickory team on a Saturday.
Yeah.
You understand that loss. But I don't know if this is more of the fact that Farrell is having what you would consider a, quote, down year, as opposed to the fact that Fort LaBeouf has figured it out offensively, folks. Justin Blows has this team, even in the loss to Meadville last week. They figured it out on the ground. They were able to get a couple of big plays. They got another huge play tonight. In fact, Dominic Walters had a 76-yard touchdown run that set up the go-ahead 2-point conversion. LaBeouf had another long touchdown as well early in this game with their quarterback. I think this team is arrived and they're for real at this point, guys, because you look at their first 2 games, easy to say that they should be 0-2, easy to say that these 2 games shouldn't have been competitive. But to see that final score across the scoreboard, and again, we'll have highlights at 11 o'clock if we don't have them later on in our show tonight, that's a testament to Justin Blows and what he's built at Fort LaBeouf.
I agree with you. To go back, growing up in this area, high school sports are cyclical.
Oh, yeah.
So everybody has a down year every now and again.
Sure.
It seems like Farrells are fewer and farther between. This may be one of them. And even we'll say an 80% Farrell team is still a very dangerous football team.
Well, and it's like you said, we're in week 2, right? So we're not trying to overreact and say, oh, Farrell's going to be terrible this year. Or
that's what we do.
But, Fort LaBeouf, like exactly what Isaac's saying, credit where credit's due. I mean,
no doubt.
That's a gutsy call.
Right.
2.5 minutes left. That's a lot of time for any team, especially Farrell, to still take the lead, and they go for 2. It pays off, and the defense holds. I mean, that's an impressive win any way you look at it.
It's a good way to find out what your team is made of too early in the season.
Yep.
To go for 2 in a situation like that,
to
be able to pull out a close win against an opponent like this early in the season, you find out what kind of guys you got, and Fort LaBeouf has got some guys that have now proven they can win a close game and they can win a dogfight.
And look, it shows signs of confidence as a head coach that you believe your team, even if they don't get that 2-point conversion, you are trusting your defense to getting stopped. Again, we don't know how many timeouts Fort LaBeouf had with 2.5 to go, but you're essentially saying, look, I trust my offense to get a 2-point conversion. If we don't convert, I trust my guys to be able to at least get one more stop, give us a chance to win the football game. And so, again, that's a big testament to Justin Blows and this Bison team, who are now 1-1 in the season and get, as Paul said, a Game of the Year candidate in a 29-28 win at home. Other scores to discuss, and we'll do that after the break, because we do got to get to a commercial here. Meadville just went final. They beat Connellsville 48-41 in quadruple overtime. So the Bulldogs in a late finish are now 2-0 on the season, and some other scores coming in as well. So we're going to take another time out here on the Gem City Sports Podcast, part of the Critical Eye. When we come back, more discussion. Hope to get some more highlights. Lots happening here on this Friday night. Stick with us. All right, back here as the gents are going over some scores. It's okay. The phones are on the table. we know what this show is. It's chaos. It's controlled chaos. We love it. Isaac Peckiash, Jonathan Williams, Paul Adams, Zach, Nick Artman back here on the Gem City Sports Podcast here on tonight's Critical Eye. We are streaming live. We are live on the CW, and we have a lot of viewers from what we've seen watching us, including a shout out to the General McLean football team who's watching us from Engine House 39. So happy Victory Friday for General McLean, getting a bite to eat after they get to victory. We're going to get to the Fort LaBeouf General McLeanian Fort LaBeouf highlights in just a second. But I want to talk quickly, guys, before we get there. Quick reaction to Meadville in a Game of the Year candidate, 48-41 in quadruple overtime against Connellsville.
Guys, Game of the Year candidate. I know it's early. Okay, quadruple overtime. Is there an echo in here? Quadruple overtime? I mean, all right.
What do you do? How many times do you go to quadruple overtime?
It's true.
First off, and then I know exactly what you're saying.
That game lasts all night long. They're lucky there's no school in the morning. Saturday morning.
And you get Monday off,
Yeah, Saturday morning, sleep in. Hopefully your coach isn't bringing you in for film on Saturday morning. Have them wait till Sunday or something. Because playing a football game that long is
They earned it. Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
speaking of big wins, I know I want to talk more about Meadville, but during the portion of the show, I do want to get to another game that just went final. How about Cathedral Prep? A team that we all sat here on last Friday night and said wasn't their best game against Erie in an 18-6 win. They're up, 7-6? 7-6 was the game against Sharon at the break.
Yeah.
Correct.
33-7, your final. That game just went in the books. Cathedral Prep, without Charbel Latouf, their number one running back who was suspended for this game, go into a 3A powerhouse in Sharon and completely dominate. You talk about impressive performances. Mike Cray's squad earns one of the night tonight.
3 words, second half adjustments. Like you said it all, 7-6 down at the half. They put up quick TV math, 27 second half points, 4 touchdowns. That's a heck of a way to end a football game. They were all but dead on this TV program last week.
Yeah.
So big win for Prep. They're 2-0, on to bigger and better things.
When I was worried about Prep, looking at the halftime score, because I'm thinking, okay, low scoring game against Erie last week, low score game against Sharon. Prep is usually pretty potent on offense, and you start to go back to, okay, are they still trying to figure it out? Are they putting it back together? They lost a lot of seniors to graduation last year, so what is happening? And then, okay, you figured it out in the second half, 33-7. You're looking okay.
I know what happened. I know how they came out and dominated the second half halftime speech.
Yeah.
It's what it always is. Comes
Yeah.
with a fire under them at halftime. Said some words that probably aren't good for TV, and we come out and we play football the way we know how to play football.
Right.
So many impressive performances tonight. Prep the victory there. Other scores that we have not gotten to yet. Grove City beating Fairview 13-6, but in a loss. Mark Sobolewski's team looking really impressive, and they'll be 1-1, and they get Girard, their rival, next week. That's going to be a heck of a game out in West Erie County. Paul will likely be there. I think we will be as well. Other scores to get to as well. At the half, last week checked Oil City 22 over Mercyhurst Prep 7. Cochranton dispatching Union City tonight 21-7. Eisenhower gets their first win of the season, 14-13 over Sagertown. Cambridge Springs, Nate Liberty squad, they keep on rolling, 32-0. They shut out Northwestern tonight. And how about the Seneca Bobcats? Don't want to toot my own horn. Bold prediction from the show last night was that I thought Seneca would be 2-0, and we'd be talking about him. Jack Corey can coach, ladies and gentlemen, and I think this is a guy who has been able to get the most out of the team he has. And again, it was the offense tonight. Seneca, back-to-back games, if I remember correctly, of 30-plus points. They're rolling now at 2-0 in the season.
Yeah. Over a good Northeast team, too.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like, there's been some changeover at Northeast, especially in the coaching staff, and they had a lot of graduating seniors, too, and people transferring. But they're still a great football team anytime you're going to go up against them. So Seneca's offense clicking.
So those are some finals tonight. Other scores also coming in as well. Erie up big over Shaw. That game close to final. We'll try to get you a final score.
Paul Johnson, 4 first-half touchdown passes in that Erie game.
And
What did we say last week?
Yeah,
What did we say
100%.
last week?
100%.
Start Paul Johnson at quarterback, and your problems on offense go away.
Yeah.
And 4 touchdowns. And Jonathan, as we talked about last week, exactly right. Paul Johnson making a big impact for Erie. All right, taking a break. I hear in my ear when we come back, we have highlights of the Farrell-Fort LaBeouf game plus the game of the week, Harbor Creek GM. We're going to get to those because we know you want to see them. More Critical Eye in the Gem City Sports Podcast when we come back. We know you want to see him, so let's show him to you. Farrell-Fort LaBeouf, the game that just went final, and the Bison coming away with the win. These are some of the early highlights from today. First play from scrimmage. This was the other big touchdown run. How about Damian Blows getting loose for a 61-yard score, 7-0 Bison in front. And on the other end, though, Aaron Pegas with the first Farrell drive, buying time, finding Steve Dean for a pickup of 14 as he gets loose for a first down. Then it's later the quarterback over the middle, finding Julius Phillips. This one good for 6, right into your living room. The touchdown makes it a 7-6 game. Fort LaBeouf led in this one, then trailed. But as we talked about, 29-28 your final, and there are some highlights from the game that just went final. Meanwhile, highlights from that game of the week that Paul witnessed, and we also talked about earlier, Harbor Creek GM. Must have been Hawaiian night at Linden Field, and the Lancers debuting their new turf today as well. 21-7 in the second. GM adds another touchdown. Teague Berger for the 1-yard plunge. 27-7. He had 46 yards on the ground. The ground game, as we said, 5 different guys with touchdowns today. P.J. Mitchell, the 1-yard carry. It's 33-7. Then Isaac Seitz, little screen pass to Jared Corwin, and the big man's about to rumble. 52 yards to pay dirt. No one's going to catch him in white. 40-7 at that point. GM with the lead. Zeitz 2 passing touchdowns, and that ZZ Top connection working well. How about another big play for GM? Kyle McConnell with a truck of 2 defenders for a large gain. Then the third, Cohen Beachley, a little 7-yard run as he's able to pick up another first down. GM, that first win of the year, they win 47-7 in the victory over Harbor Creek. Guys, just want to quickly, again, touch on a couple of other things that we really haven't gotten to. But the theme of the night tonight, Nick, you made a really good point during the break that we're only 2 weeks into the season, but you're noticing more of a trend this year than maybe we've seen in previous years.
Yeah, typically, it's weird to say, but D10 doesn't travel well. You have a D10 team up here in Erie County heading down to Mercer County, I should say. It's Erie County teams don't travel well. They're looking good here in the first couple games of the season. Cathedral Prep over Sharon. You have a lot of teams just that are
over Fair.
Yeah, that's the biggest one. You have teams that are maybe, I wouldn't say not supposed to win, but don't usually win, and they're looking good, even going up against some WPIAL powerhouses. Listen, I know GM's 1-1, but as close as that game was and as well as they played against a WPIAL powerhouse, that's a win for me. They're seconds away. They're a yard away from being 2-0. Erie County teams they're coming out hot.
Yeah, you can make the same case for McDowell week 1 going down and
Yeah.
by 2 points at the stroke of midnight,
Yeah.
basically, by the time their game was over with. Like, these teams from Erie County are representing very well to start the beginning of the season.
And again, keep in mind, too, these early season matchups, while they don't matter as much for region and playoff consideration,
Right.
It's a good barometer, as Jonathan talked about earlier in the show, of where you're at as a team. And you look at, there are a lot of 2-0 teams, but another theme of the night is bounce backs. General McLean bounces back from a loss. Cathedral Prep, even though they won week 1, I think you call it a bounce back effort in the way they went from week 1 and struggling offensively to week 2 and putting 33 points in a good Sharon team.
Yeah.
So many other teams that bounce back. Of course, Fort LaBeouf, after falling to Meadville in week 1, they get this big win over Farrell. I mean, you just go down the list of the number of teams that were able to respond after a tough week 1 loss. And that's why high school football is a week-to-week game. The NFL is a week-to-week league. High school football is a week-to-week game. And we've seen that consistently throughout the night tonight. Also throw in a team like Eisenhower, who really struggled offensively in week 1. They come out with a win against Sagertown, and they moved to 1-1. So a lot of teams that needed a first win tonight got it, and other squads moving to 2-0 as well. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll wrap up our television portion of the show and then go live for 10 to 15 more minutes online as well. Wrapping up the live portion of the Gem City Sports Podcast when we come back. Seconds left in the TV portion of this show, gentlemen. We'll start. Whoever wants to speak on the panel can. Most impressive performance of the night.
Individual player or team?
Team.
I'm going to give it to the General McLean Lancers. I mean, obviously the team I went to see, but they ran the football all over Harbor Creek tonight, and Harbor Creek stopped Oil City last week. Oil City had a pretty good night tonight against Mercyhurst Prep. Thank you. And, the picture's starting to become clear. I think General McLean putting up 45-plus in 2 straight weeks, we know how dominant that offense can be and really has been. The defense got themselves together in that middle of that first quarter. They could be a very dangerous team.
Anybody else?
I'm probably going to go Meadville. Anytime you can win a game in 4 overtimes, in any overtimes, it's a great win. and it's a great win. That's about as much as I've got.
Nick, do you want to give the one that we're missing?
See, I want to say Fort LaBeouf. I feel like we should all say Fort LaBeouf. But I do want to give some love to Erie High. Bounce back game against Shaw. 56-6 is an impressive bounce back. But yes, of course, I think we can all just go ahead and say we agree. Fort LaBeouf had a great night tonight.
Now, who's partying harder, Meadville or Waterford?
We'll leave that up. All right, we're done with the TV portion of this show. Join us back next Friday, same podcast, but we are on YouTube, Twitch, and Facebook for the next 10 to 15 minutes live. Thanks for being with us. Erie News Now, Football Fridays at 11 o'clock. All right, we are back for the online viewers of this show. Isaac Petcash, Jonathan Williams, Paul Adamczak, and Nick Artman joining us for the conclusion of the Gem City Sports Podcast. We just went off the air on the CW and covered a lot. My goodness, a half hour flies when you're having a lot of fun and a lot of great stuff with high school football tonight, guys. I know we wanted to get into the NFL, but there's just too much good stuff from this Friday night to not continue with this conversation. You know, we left things off with talking about the best performing teams of the night. And Paul, you mentioned General McLean. Jonathan, you talked about Erie and the bounce back performance. Nick, you talked about Erie and the bounce back performance. We talked about Meadville, Fort LaBeouf as well. You know, it's so interesting because we talk about high school football being week to week league. But I think the one thing that we're also noticing as well is the offenses are starting to come alive too. 38 points from Meadville, 33 points from Prep, 47 points from General McLean. Doesn't always happen early in the season, maybe in District 10 more so than other districts around the state of Pennsylvania. But a significant amount of points scored tonight from the teams that picked up victories.
Yeah, I'm seeing scores on like both sides of the spectrum. It's not very many middle tier scores as far as like 20 or 15, 16, 17, 18 points. It's either like low scoring, like one touchdown a piece games, or we're putting up 40 and 50. I don't know if this is normal for Erie County football. I don't know if this
welcome
is an
to
accurate
District
introduction.
10.
But it's been interesting to see like just opposite ends of the spectrum on how these teams play and how some teams are really grind it out and play defense and run the ball and just hold on to win, and other teams are like, we're going to blow up the scoreboard.
Yeah, and we've talked about this on Flagship City, where we're saying, you know, typically the county teams versus the city teams, the county teams are usually more of a, hey, let's establish the run, right? Mm-hmm. Let's control the clock. Let's control time of possession. But then you have, you know, GM blow up tonight, and then you have Fort LaBeouf taking down Farrell, like playing aggressive offensive football. That's a change coming out of the county teams.
Yeah, and I think, too, we talked about this with Marshall McCormick last night, and that's been a trend the last few years with the new coaches that are coming in. Maybe not as much Justin Bloss, although he's introduced some other schematics outside of the wing T, but whether it's General McLean and Marshall McCormick, some with Justin Bloss and Fort LaBeouf. Even Brian Borkovich, who's come into Meadville the last couple of years under head coach Ray Collins and has really turned around that offense, that they can become a passing team as well. There are a lot of new coaches and new blood that are allowing teams to spread the football outside the hash marks and make big plays. And I think we saw that again tonight with, of course, the scores that are coming into the highlights that we showed you. Want to talk and get into, guys, a little bit of Region 5 and where things stand now. That, of course, the Erie County region, we keep an eye on it consistently day in, day out. How about the parity in the first two games? No region games, of course, have been played yet. But the only 2-0 team is Corey. Northeast, the only 0-2 team. Then you have Fort LaBeouf, Fairview, Harbor Creek, Girard. Girard 0-1. But the other four teams sitting at 1-1 right now. I said last week on the Critical Eye that I thought it was Corey and Fairview's region title to contend with. Now I think you got to put Fort LaBeouf in that category now.
Yeah, there are no softball teams in that region. Even you look at Girard, they're going to play Titusville tomorrow night. Titusville in that region. Northeast, another team that 0-2 right now, but you said, Nick, that's a tough team as well with a new coach. There are no lightweights in that division or in that region, and it's going to be very interesting once we start region play. And you mentioned it earlier in the show, Girard and Fairview are going to contend next week, the backyard brawl. It's always fun in Region 5.
Yeah, looking at some of the games, by the way, we never even got to next week's schedule. Some of the big games that we'll be keeping an eye on. Fairview, of course, facing Girard. Northeast Harbor Creek, which is going to be a really big region matchup. The Grape Pickers looking for their first win. That's a rivalry matchup. Seneca with a chance to go to 3-0. They're going to travel to Union City next week, and I think they got a good shot to win that game. To me, though, the game I'm looking at would be Fort LaBeouf Corey. Bison traveling to Corey to take on a 2-0 Beaver team. And one thing that we are learning, too, guys, early in the season, and if this sounds obvious, maybe it is, but I also think it's important to note, there's no room for error with the way that some of these teams in Region 5 are playing, specifically Corey, LaBeouf, Fairview, even Harbor Creek, maybe to an extent at 1-1. You have to show out every single night. And I think more importantly in this region, your defense is going to have to come up with some big plays because you have teams who can put points on the scoreboard, as we saw tonight, referenced by Corey on Thursday and Fort LaBeouf tonight.
Yeah, coaches always preach every coach to every team. You can't take any games off. You can't take any plays off. You can't take any days off. Every week matters. Every game matters. And you got to look at everybody like they're the same opponent and like they're just as good as the last. That has been the case for this season. When you look at regional rankings and standings and you look at everyone's record, is what everybody's even. Yeah. So every game matters because that one loss that you take, that one playoff that you take, that one game that you take off could be the difference between being a 1 seed, a 2 seed, a 3 seed, or missing the playoffs. So every game is really going to be equally important for all of these teams.
And again, the other thing, too, I think to keep in mind, you have to factor in the Mercer County teams with the 3A playoffs in particular. And Mark Soboleski, Fairview head coach, mentioned this on the show last week when he called in, is that Erie County, and this is not hidden, it's not buried, it's out front and center. Erie County has not fared well against Mercer County teams historically in the playoffs. To see a Fort LaBeouf beat a Farrell team, understanding that, okay, it's a 3A versus 2A, and then see Fairview go to Grove City and be competitive to the point where, if not for a fumble inside the 10-yard line that was returned for a touchdown, that was the game, by the way, tonight. Grove City had a 93-yard fumble recovery touchdown that ended up turning the tide. Does it give these Erie County teams more belief that they can, especially in 3A, potentially get into a battle in the playoffs with the Mercer County teams?
Well, that's what you like to think every year. We've had some good, I call them Erie County teams versus Mercer County teams, and we've seen that in the past. We'll see when the playoffs hit here. We are very, very early season.
But we had the game of the week.
We've had two of them. We've had 2 game of the year.
Or game of the year, yeah, sorry.
I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. The picture is becoming clear, and things are trending in the right direction for Erie County fans. Hickory is still very, very good.
Yep.
I think Sharon kind of got a little over their skis in that second half. I still think they're going to be around certainly late in the season. That AAA bracket in Mercer County, as you mentioned, Isaac, is just it's a death march.
It's way too early to say, we're talking about trends. We're saying, okay, the Erie County teams are going down to Mercer County and they're looking good. And we're saying, okay, we can start to watch this. But yeah, I'm not ready to say this is what we're going to see come playoff time. You know what I mean? We hope, small sample size, and we'll continue to track that. At least I will. I know I will be continue to track that as we move forward through the season. But it would be a great story to watch if it happens.
One thing I will say though is that it means a lot when you can see it on film.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we're beating these teams, or we're in competitive games with these teams where we're 1 play, 2 plays away from it being a different ball game. It means a lot, and apparently, from what I'm hearing, it hasn't been very close in recent years. It's been harder to turn the film on and see, okay, we fixed this right here, we fixed this right here, we got a shot. This season, at least the first 2 weeks of the season, it's been put on film that Erie County teams can compete with Mercer County teams. And it's going to be very interesting to see if they can carry that deeper into the season and into the playoffs.
And again, look, no disrespect to the Mercer County powerhouses. You still understand that Sharon and Hickory are going to be the class of 3A, and until proven otherwise, it's not likely, going to change, at least in the minds of many. I know sometimes there are certain people who will go at us when we make the argument about, hey, Erie County team should be included too.
No, not in sports.
You'd be surprised. But again, to see the competitiveness in these games, I think is important from an early season standpoint. And now you get into region play, and now you feel like you have something to play for, especially getting into week 3-4 when the meat of your season starts to come into play.
I think
Let's-
you hit the nail on the head. Now you get into region play. Now we'll see
Yeah.
who's who.
Want to run down the scores in case you missed them from today. Of course, General McLean, the 47-19 winners over the Harbor Creek Huskies. Other games that were important in the Region 5A consideration, non-region game that is. Fort LaBeouf 29-28 over Farrell. Teams that are now 2-0 on the season. Cathedral Prep 33-7 over Sharon. Very impressive from Mike Cray's squad. And again, remember, keep in mind, they did not have Charbel Latouf, arguably their RB1 in this game, who was suspended from an altercation stemming from the Prep Erie game late in that one. Other 2-0 teams, Cambridge Springs. They shut out Northwestern 32-0. They are rolling through the beginning part of their schedule. And in all reality, the big matchup will come later in the season with Reynolds. But for now, Cambridge Springs continues to steamroll over their opponents. Other teams that are also 2-0, the Seneca Bobcats, Jack Corey squad 2-0. They beat Northeast 32-19. Another win for Seneca against a team that has some power on offense, but the Bobcats offense is making strides. And very similar to what we saw in the 2022 season when Ryan Miller and that offense were able to put up 30, 35, 40 points a game.
Yeah, and they're doing it with the quarterback now. They've traded the running back position with the quarterback position, and they're just, it's the old high school. Let's give our best player the ball on every play,
Yeah.
and we're going to come away, we feel, with the best chance to win. And that's what they're doing. He's played great. He's had 200 yards on the ground, I think, both starts this year. So Seneca is well on their way.
Meadville also 2-0, quadruple overtime win, 48-41 over Connellsville. That was a heck of an ending to that game, which, according to Alex Toper of the Meadville Tribune, ended on an interception in quad overtime. So the victory going to Meadville in that game. Other scores locally around, in case you missed it, McDowell falling in Aaron Slocum's home debut, 47-21 to Walsh Jesuit, who's a power out of the state of Ohio. Erie High with Paul Johnson in at quarterback. Paul mentioned it, 4 first-half touchdowns, 56-6 over Shaw. My goodness, what a job by Andre Henderson of the Royals to bounce back.
How big of a deal do you think that is? Sorry, not to cut you off.
No.
I mean, I think that's huge for Erie, right?
I'm glad you cut him off because I was thinking I wanted to unpack this a little
Yes, yeah.
Can we-
There is a line that will
when Paul and I are not here next week, you know what happens. But no, seriously, like there was so much hype and build up around this game, last week's game, going
Right.
into the Vet Stadium. Erie, a bit of a heartbreaker, right? And then now you have this dominant win. Like, I feel like you talked about halftime speech in the Cathedral Prep game. This was Prep Week speech. This was all week. They're saying, hey, listen, you need to, this is a statement game, right? As much as a statement game week 2 can be. But I think this is really important for Erie as they move forward, and the Royals to gain that confidence after a tough week 1 to come out and dominate like they do in week 2. Paul Johnson, you said this last week, he needs to be the starter. It seemed to work this week.
Erie seems to be a microcosm of almost everything that we've been talking about tonight. How important region games are. They lost a big region game last week to Cathedral Prep.
Yeah.
We talked about the difference between the quarterback play last week and then coming into this week. Paul Johnson, 4 first-half touchdowns. How big do you guys really think that it is? That Erie, or I should say Prep got Erie in week 1 before they had the quarterback situation figured out, as opposed to Prep playing Erie maybe in the last week in the season when Erie is potentially rolling with a guy who's now started multiple weeks in a row, and that offense is firing on all cylinders.
Yeah,
Tonight, with the 56-point Erie is more or less what I expected to see last week against Prep,
Yeah.
and what I really think this team can be this season.
Yep.
If only we had rematches late in the season. If you stayed at week 10 for what were the best games early in the season, we'd play them again. But it's not the NFL. There's no 2 division games. Maybe we can get that down the road in 10 to 15 years. Other final scores before we sign off here. We talked about Seneca. How about Eisenhower, 14-13 over Sagertown? They get their first win. Some scores from the Mercer County Circuit. Greenville beat Sharpsville 25-13, and Wilmington falling to Hubbard, Ohio, in that game that I believe just went final. Oil City continues to lead Mercyhurst Prep, by the way, in the second half. So the Oilers trying to move to 1-1 after they fell to Harbor Creek. All right, final thoughts, guys. We will try our best to get our predictions right on this final part of the show. Let's start with this. We'll go down the panel, Nick. one thing that you think we will be talking about on Monday's edition of the show when we go into the Talk Erie studio. It can be anything: high school football, NFL, other sports, you name it. Give us one thing that you think we're talking about.
Well, I'm 0 for 2 on predictions in the last 2 weeks, so
Okay.
I'm not going to throw out a prediction for this one.
1 for 3 means you're at the top of the lineup for the Cleveland Guardians. I know for the Pittsburgh Pirates. You're like, the Guardians are going to win the division for the Pirates. All right.
You're a Hall of Famer for the Pirates at that point, and that's coming from a lifelong Pirates fan.
Yeah.
No, I think what we're going to be talking about on Monday is we're definitely going to be recapping this. I would love to kind of unpack. We're going to get some more of the detailed stats of coming in from these late games and things like that. But we're going to talk a lot of NFL on Monday. We're going to be looking at strengths and weaknesses of the Bills, the Browns, and the Steelers as we move into week 1 of the NFL.
There you have it. Foreshadowing for Monday's show. All right, Paul, give us something you think we're talking about.
Well, I was going to say we're going to be talking NFL because next week we open up week 1. Thursday night football is going to be fantastic. I want to talk Browns. I want to talk Steelers. I want to talk Bills. I want to talk potential Super Bowls. It's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to be talking football. That's what Monday's going to be.
Floor is yours, Jonathan.
See, now it's going to look like I'm just copying you guys.
We all have the same thing, really.
I was going to say we're going to talk NFL too, and I'm going to focus more on Pittsburgh, and we're going to talk a lot about that wide receiver room and if there's anything that can be done to help that receiver room.
All right, I guess I'll give a bold prediction because the rest of you three chickens.
Because you won yours last week. You're riding high. Riding the hot hand.
Yeah, again, I only get them right once in a while. I think I'll go on the NFL circuit. I think we're going to be talking NFL. A bold prediction that I will make, though, is that we are going to be talking about how neither Pittsburgh nor Cleveland is making the playoffs, but none of those two teams are going to finish last in the AFC North. How about that?
Interesting. So you're saying only one team from the AFC North is going to make it in?
I guess that's.
I can't wait to hear that on Monday morning.
I'm
and then
more
debate it.
interested to know who you think the number 4 team in the AFC North is.
Well, by process of elimination.
That's the argument I'm waiting for you to
reveal
make.
it for you, but I think you get a good idea. You have to have a strong offensive line to protect a great quarterback. That's all I'll say. It might be a case with Pittsburgh, too, if they continue to struggle. All right, we're done here on this Friday. We want to thank all of you, whether you were watching on the CW or continuing to watch with us here on social media and whatnot, for being a part of our Friday show. We're just getting the Gem City Sports Podcast Network started, but as you can tell, it's a passion project for the 4 of us, and we're more than grateful to have your support as we continue along with the show. 9 a.m. on TalkErie.com. We will be live with our next episode of the Gem City Sportsnet podcast. Of course, wherever you get your podcasts as well, we'll be there and talking NFL, high school football, and the works as the season rolls along. 11:15 on WICU and WSEE is Football Fridays, all the highlights that you missed from our show tonight. Take care. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Be safe. Happy Labor Day. And if you're traveling, make sure to maintain a safe speed.